Welcome to Top Money Myths with New York Times bestselling author Doug Andrew.
Thank you. What a nice, intimate group and setting we have here today. I'm so excited to teach you some of these dynamic strategies and concepts. Today, my objective is to teach you about some myth conceptions. I want to dispel those myths and help you understand how to choose the right investments based upon 3 simple tests. You know, there's no question we've been suffering through some great economic storms recently, and today I want to empower you with some new strategies and solutions that have been tested and proven through decades. I wrote an ebook earlier this year called Create Your Own Economic Stimulus Plan, Save Yourself Because Big Government Can't. In that ebook, I compare the economy, the United States economy, like a sinking ship because of all of this spending that we're doing in this country, trying to spend our way out of a recession. And I think because of this, we're going to see future taxes and inflation. And what I want to do is show you today how you can insulate yourself from the tax and inflation power curve. I want to help you board your own lifeboat so that no matter what happens in the future with taxes and inflation, you can become immune. You can make yourself recession-proof from those. Does that sound good? So, what should you be doing? Well, I want you to understand when we're through here in the next half an hour how no matter what happens in the stock market or the real estate market, even if your assets go down in value, you will not lose a dime. So, I have written several books over the course of my 37 years as a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist. And back in 2002, I released my first book, and I titled it Missed Fortune, because of the fortunes people miss out on when they simply don't know what they don't know, because you can't be aware of something you're not aware of. So I want to make you aware of certain strategies, vehicles, tools that have been grandfathered in the Internal Revenue Code for decades that most people don't even know about, even CPAs and tax attorneys, because I've had over 3,000 of them come through intensive training sessions, and they sit there and their mouths are open and they say, I didn't know what I didn't know. So put on your seatbelt, because I'm going to teach you some of these strategies. You know, after that book was released and we self-published it, we were going through 5,000 copies a month, and Time Warner, my publisher, commissioned me to write a shorter, more palatable book, and we titled that Missed Fortune 101, which is our all-time bestseller. This may be for you if you just like the bottom line and you don't need all the numbers. And then Warner saw that this was not a fad. These types of strategies actually help people. They're validated in economic times like we're in right now. So they commissioned me to write a book to baby boomers, because there's 78 million baby boomers who are approaching retirement, and they're feeling very frustrated because they have lost their future. They saw their IRAs and 401ks in one single year, 2008, drop as much as 50% in value. Well, I'm going to teach you how to insulate yourself so that when the economy goes down, you will not lose a dime. Also, my 2 sons, Emron and Aaron, co-authored a book with me that was released in 2007 titled Millionaire by 30. By using these strategies, this will show you how you can accumulate $1 million safely and tax-free. Every $1 million that you accumulate, I'll prove to you, can generate $70,000 or $80,000 a year of tax-free income that can last as long as you do. So, do you know that in 2008, most Americans lost 31% of the value of their IRAs and 401ks. Some people lost 40 and 50%. And so I wrote an article, some people did not suffer any financial losses that year. The people who follow these strategies may not have made much of anything, but they didn't lose. And Will Rogers once said, people get more concerned about the return of their money instead of the return on their money when things get bad. Would you agree? Yeah. And so in 2009, in fact, the first quarter, many smart and safe savers were experiencing financial gains of 12 to 15% in this kind of an economy, and they locked those gains in. I'm going to show you how here in a moment. So where do I put my money so I won't lose and still have a potential to make a good rate of return? Let me show you what I do. See, if you understood and applied these concepts I'm about to teach you, during the last 10 years, your retirement funds could have been worth double what they were just 10 years ago. Do you know that most Americans don't even have back what they had just 10 years ago? They're trying to get back to that high water mark But the strategies that I'm going to teach you will show you, no matter what happens, the stock market and the real estate market has been compared to someone like a person with a yo-yo walking up some stairs. Well, what if the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones 10 years from now is exactly where it is today? Because that's where we're at. The Dow and the S&P are basically where they were 10 years ago, and that's why most people are just back to break even. And yet, people who followed these indexing strategies that I'm now going to teach you have as much as double what they had just 10 years ago, even if the person with the yo-yo is just walking across a flat floor, because we're always going to have this going on, right? And it doesn't have to be going up just as long as it goes up and down over that time period. I'll show you how to profit safely and tax-free. There's 4 phases of retirement. The contribution phase, where we set aside money for the future, and it overlaps the accumulation phase. And someday we're going to start taking money out. We're going to withdraw money. Well, too many people go into withdrawal when they hit that phase because of the amount of tax they're going to pay on the back end. And then none of us are getting out of here alive. I don't mean today, sir. I mean out of this life. And so most of us leave behind something that would have sustained us had we lived longer. And if it's in an IRA or 401k, do you know the average American only leaves behind 22 to 28 cents on the dollar to their non-spousal heirs if they leave their money in a stretch IRA or 401k? And yet that's what they tell you to do on CNBC, isn't it? That is not the way to go. People save money in credit unions and banks because they get worried, they hunker down, they want safety, they earn 1% or 2% if they're lucky the last few years. That is the worst. It's like crawling towards the finish line, and it's taxed in all 4 phases. If you take after-tax money and you put it into non-qualified annuities, it gets tax deferred, but you're going to have to pay tax down the road on the gain, and it's taxed LIFO. That means last money in, your interest is the first money coming out. The IRS wants their piece when you start to take your money. That's like walking towards the finish line. People who sock away money in traditional IRAs and 401ks get a tax break on the front end, on the seed money, but later on when they go to harvest their money in retirement, that's when they get hit with tax on the back end. And most people make the mistake of thinking they're going to be in a lower tax bracket when they retire. That is no longer axiomatic. Most people are finding themselves in as high or higher tax bracket as they've ever been in because the cost of living has continued to go up, taxes have gone up, okay? And they pay off their house and they're no longer contributing money. The kids are all gone, so they don't have the tax deductions that they once had. I know people who have income that's 60% less than when they were working, and they're paying as much or more in income tax than when they were earning the full amount of money, okay? This is a shock to many people. I use a strategy called MFTA, Section 101A of the Internal Revenue Code, Alternatives, where I can take after-tax money, and it will accumulate tax-free. I can access my money, including all of the gain, tax-free, and when I ultimately pass away, it transfers income tax-free. There's only one vehicle that does that. I know because I've been a financial strategist for 37 years. This is what I do with my money, and I'll show you how to do it the smart way. We also have asset optimization strategies wherein you can get a tax break on the front end, but never at the sacrifice of having it be tax-free on the back end. But I like to have my cake and eat it too, wouldn't you? Okay, well, let me show you how to do that. You need to understand that a 25% loss has to be followed by a 33% gain to get back to break even. So follow me over here to the whiteboard, and I'll teach you what I'm talking about. See, if I have $100,000 accumulated in a nest egg, and I suffer a 25% loss down to $75,000, most people don't understand that that $75,000 now has to experience a 33% gain. What's a third of 75? $25,000 in order to get back to break even. What if I have a $100,000 nest egg and it suffers a 33% loss? A lot of people experienced that in 2008. A 33% loss down to $66,000 now has to experience a 50% gain. You have to make 50% of $66,000 in a gain to get back to break even. What if you suffered a 50% loss? I know a lot of people who lost half of the value in their IRAs and 401ks just in 1 year, 2008. So if that $100,000 lost value down to $50,000, what does that $50,000 now have to experience to get back to break even? 100% gain. The reason why I'm teaching you this is because, a few months ago on the Today Show, they brought on a bunch of financial advisors, and they were thumping themselves on the chest and saying, well, folks, if you lost 33%, you would have been up 37% now if you would have just stayed the course. And people were going, oh, okay, lose 33, make 37. They think they're ahead of the game, but they're looking at their IRAs and 401ks, and they're not back to break even yet because they don't understand the math. Most people missed the gain because they hunkered down and put their money in a bank account at 1%, and they missed the upswing. Can you relate to this? Well, let me show you this same math on the other end. Let's say that you accumulate $1 million nest egg, and it's earning 7.5%. 7.5% on $1 million would allow you to pull out $75,000 a year in interest without depleting your principal, correct? Well, $75,000, that's nice, but hey, you've got to pay tax on that. If this was on top of other income, Social Security or a defined benefit pension, you may end up paying about a third of that in tax. In fact, a married couple filing a joint tax return, making over $68,000, every dollar over that threshold, you're going to pay about 25% in federal tax, and in 41 out of 50 states, about another 7 or 8%. So that means a third of that is going to go out the window in tax, $25,000 in tax. So you're only netting $50,000 to spend. Do you understand that? Well, how much more do you need to withdraw out of a nest egg earning 7.5% in a 33% bracket in order to have a net of $75,000 to spend? Because if inflation is 5%, that will double the cost of living about every 15 years. So 15 years down the road, you're going to need twice this much to have the same purchasing power, to be able to buy the same gallons of gas and loaves of bread, prescriptions, golf green fees, and so forth that you can buy today for $75,000. Well, in a 33% bracket, you have to pull out 50% more. You would have to pull out $112,500 a year out of your $1 million nest egg, pay tax of $37,500. There's your tax. To net what? $75,000, and that $75,000 is only going to be able to buy as much as $37,500 did maybe 15 years ago. Do you see the problem? Well, let's take $1 million nest egg earning 10%, because I'm going to show you in a minute how many people safely and conservatively have averaged in excess of 10% the last 4 years, probably the worst 4 years since the Great Depression, and they've done it safely. Well, if I had $1 million nest egg earning 10%, you would think, well, I can pull out $100,000 a year and never deplete my $1 million principal, right? Well, here we go again. We got to pay tax on that. So in a 33% bracket, I'd pay $33,000 in tax, and what am I netting? $66,000. Well, sooner or later, that maybe is not going to be enough to cut it. So how much more in a 33% bracket do I have to withdraw to net $100,000 to spend? If this is taxable, I have to pull out $150,000, 50% more than 100, pay tax of a third of that, $50,000, to the government in order to net $100,000 to spend. Listen close. If you got $1 million nest egg earning 7.5%, and you have to pull out $112,500 to net $75,000, your $1 million nest egg is going to be totally drained dry in 14 years. You're going to be out of money. If you have $1 million nest egg earning 10% and you have to pull out $150,000 to net $100,000, that nest egg will be totally drained dry in 11 years. Well, if you do what I'm going to show you next, and you accumulate $1 million nest egg and it's tax-free, and you link it to the things that are inflating, if you pull out $100,000, you get to spend $100,000. Because I'm going to show you in the Internal Revenue Code, it's not deemed earned, passive, or portfolio income. It doesn't affect your Social Security or Medicare. The IRS knows you receive it. I have people who have been withdrawing money like this for years. And the IRS receives a statement, but it is not taxable. They took ownership of their future. You pull out $100,000, you get to spend $100,000. So if you have $1 million nest egg, and this one you have to pull out $150,000 to net $100,000, and it runs out of money in 11 years, but you have a strategy where you have $1 million, and you only have to pull out $100,000 to net $100,000, and if that's earning 10%, how much do you have left in 11 years when your neighbor who kept their IRAs and 401ks is out of money? You still have your $1 million, don't you? Let's say that one of you makes it to age 96, because the life expectancy between a husband or a wife among a baby boomer couple is age 96. One of you will make it to age 96 is the average. So if you live 20 more years from age 76 to age 96, and you experienced another $100,000 of tax-free income for 20 years, versus if you left your money in IRAs or 401ks, that sounds like 20 years times 100,000 is a $2 million better retirement fund, right? How many of you would like to have a $2 million better retirement fund? Well, yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about. And at age 96, how much do you still have left? You still have the $1 million nest egg. It will last as long as you do. That's the power of these concepts. Other than that, I don't have any strong feelings on this subject, okay? Now, whenever you reposition serious cash, I teach in my books, in my various educational webinars, it has to pass 3 simple tests. It's got to pass the liquidity test. In other words, can I get my money back when I want it back? Is it guaranteed or insured? How safe is it? And number 3, a rate of return. I need to get a rate of return, but I don't need pie-in-the-sky rates of return. I need a rate of return that is linked to inflation, that'll stay ahead of inflation when we experience things going up. And it's got to be greater than taxes, or it's got to be tax-free, right? And so the rate of return, if it's tax-favored, is like having icing on the cake. And so this is the order. I like to have my cake and eat it too, so I like all of the above. So in all of my various educational materials, I use a risk-return paradigm, and I list 16 general categories of investments from highest risk to lowest risk, and I prove that this many of them do not pass the liquidity test. You can't get your money back quick enough when you need it. This many more do not pass the safety test, especially safety of principal, so that whatever you have in principal and whatever you made last year becomes principal. You do not lose what you made last year. This is critical. And number 3, the rate of return test. You don't get a rate of return that stays ahead of inflation or that's linked to inflation. An annuity is simply a savings account with an insurance company. Most legal reserve insurance companies are extremely safe because they have to have reserves on hand far greater, more stringent than most banks and credit unions, okay? But money in an annuity is just tax deferred. When you withdraw the money, it's taxable and it's tax LIFO. Money in a mutual fund, you know, if it's a growth mutual fund, you might make 30% one year, but you might lose 35% the next year, okay? It's very volatile. And it's taxed as earned, or if it's an IRA or 401k, you're just putting it off. It's going to be taxed down the road. There is only one of these 3 that gives you a tax-favored harvest. Only one of these 16 that accumulates your money tax-free allows you to access your money tax-free, and when you die, it transfers income tax-free. And that's a maximum funded, tax-advantaged insurance contract. Now, there's 3 types of insurance contracts: fixed, variable, and indexed. The fixed, you can just tell the insurance company, leave my money in the fixed portfolio and credit me whatever you're doing. If you just want to be conservative, you can do that. Variable is where you tell the insurance company, put it out into a variable environment, like a mutual fund environment. I don't own a variable contract. Never have and I never will, because there's no guarantees. You can lose 30%, you can make 35%, but that deviation is 65%, and you'd have to earn 10.5% to get the same net rate of return that a fixed contract can do at just 7.5%, because the spigot on the bucket is much bigger. That's why I don't use them. If you want to participate in the market without any risk, just link it to that. You use the equity indexed. I have some that have 1% floors, and up through 2007, I had 17% caps. The average over the previous 30 years, based on the actual S&P performance, was 9.62%. And then the next year it went down to 9.18 and then 9.61. Now it has a cap of 12%. You would have averaged 8%. Tax-free, folks. 8% tax-free is like getting 12% taxable in a 33% bracket, right? How many of you would be satisfied with an 8% tax-free return? I would, okay? If you have your money in the market, this is 1997 to 2007, if you had 100,000 in the market and then you went down and up, versus in a indexing strategy, you would not participate as much when it goes up, but you would not lose when the market goes down. What's the difference? In the low point, in the market, 152,000 versus 189. I'd rather have this strategy tax-free than this one taxable, okay? This is called lock-in and reset. It means that when the market goes up, if you're in the market, okay, you could be subject to losing what you once made. But in indexing, that gain becomes principal. The 8% that I earned in 2007, I kept that 8%. If I had $1 million, I had $1,080,000, that now becomes principal. That is not subject to loss again. Does that make sense? You keep what you made. And so when the market goes down, you don't lose, because if you have your money in the market, you would lose. Here, you might make 0 or 1%. If it comes back 5% in just 36 months, that's a difference of 12.2%. Here's the actual S&P 500 over the last 10 years, sort of bottoming out in 2008 and barely coming back in the spring of 2009. It's reenacted here in the red. Many people with $100,000 10 years ago, at the bottom in 2008, it was only worth 60% of $100,000. It barely came back to $68,000 in April of 2009. If you had used indexing with a 0% floor and a 15% cap, you would have had 5 of those years where you earned nothing, but you didn't lose. The other 5 years you made gains, you would have ended up with $178,000 instead of $68,000 in the worst down point, and just barely coming back. So traditional financial planning offers you guarantees with little upside, or upside with no guarantees. Whereas a maximum funded tax advantage insurance contract gives you guarantees with an upside potential. So folks, over 35 years, there's only one 8-year period where having your money in the market was better. And then what happened? 9/11. And then the current recession. Instead of having $5.6 million in the market and then pay tax on that of a third or more and ending up with $3.8 million, why not put your money into something more predictable, accumulate the money tax-free, and have $8 million, and make money not relying on the S&P being up there, but just walking across the room? As long as it's always doing this, you end up down the road with $8 million and have it be tax-free. What would you rather have? Hamburger A or hamburger B? Okay? I'd rather have hamburger A. So you may be sitting there thinking, I've always thought that insurance in general was a poor investment. Well, actually, we agree, okay? Because most insurance is not structured correctly and not funded properly. It's extremely important you understand how to do this in compliance with the Internal Revenue Code and TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA tax citations. That's what our professional advisors understand how to do. They come through hours and hours of training to know how to do this. CPAs and tax attorneys come and they sit there with their mouths open. They didn't know what they didn't know. I know because I've had over 3,000 of them come through my training. I want you to be able to coast towards retirement in the warmth of this gondola instead of taking unnecessary risk. Most skiers get hurt on the last run of the day because they're tired and they're worn out. On your last run towards retirement, this is the answer. We have 31 flavors of missed fortune. Flavors is an acronym that I use that stands for Fortunes Lost Amid Valid Optimization and Reallocation Strategies. We can show you various ways that people miss out on fortunes because they simply follow the crowd, and if you were to reposition your money without increasing your outlay one dime, you can dramatically increase your retirement nest egg. You know, Victor Hugo once said there's something more powerful than all the armies in the world, and that's an idea whose time has come. Indexing is one of those ideas. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.